members, it's the appointed time. We have a quorum. Let's get started. This meeting is scheduled to finish at 7 p.m. If necessary, I will extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Let me remind members, if you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to the items to be discussed today, please, in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedures, disclose the nature of such interest before you speak on the relevant items. I'd also like to draw members' attention to Rule 84 of the Rules of Procedures in relation to voting in case of direct pecuniary interest. There is one public works project to be dealt with today. I declare that I'm the consultant of Bank of China, Hong Kong. The first item today is FCR bracket 2024-2527. This item invites members to endorse the recommendation made by the Public Works Subcommittee on the 19th of June 2024 in relation to paper PWSC bracket 2024-25-7. This project is 69RG, the upgrading of the remaining part of 69RG to Cat A at an estimated cost of $2,888.4 million in money of the day prices. According to paragraph 3A of the Finance Committee procedure, the Public Works Subcommittee does not recommend further discussion on this paper, and there are not more than 3 members jointly requesting this committee to have a further discussion on this paper. Therefore, we won't further discuss this paper. Now I will put this item to vote. Will those in favor of the proposal set out in FCR 2024-25-27 please raise their hands? For those against, please raise their hands. All right, I think that the majority of the members present are in favor of this proposal. This proposal is passed. Second item to be dealt with today is FCR bracket 2025-2425-26. This item invites members to approve the creation of a commitment of $1,395.818 million for building the eHealth plus healthcare information infrastructure. We discussed this item for 1.5 hours in the last FC meeting. 14 members have spoken on this item. 9 members were waiting to speak last time. In order to better control the time, I appeal to those who'd like to speak on this item to press the request to speak button as soon as possible. I will draw a line after the second member has spoken on this item today, and no other members will be allowed to press the button to speak on this item. We have with us Mr. Sam Ho, Deputy Secretary for Health, Ms. Eric Lam, Principal Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Chen Ngai Chung, Head of Information Technology and Health, Mr. Dixon Wong, Chief Systems Manager from the Hospital Authority, and Mr. Eric Wong, Chief Systems Manager from the Hospital Authority. 10 members are waiting to speak. They are Ms. Connie Lam, Professor William Wong, Reverend Peter Kuhn, Mr. Yim Kong, Ms. Lillian Kwok, Professor Priscilla Leung, Mr. Tony Chang, Ms. Eunice Yong, Mr. Kenneth Lau, Mr. Tang Fei, Mr. Jesse Shang. 11 members in total. Ms. Connie Lam, please. Thank you, Chairman. I support the eHealth Plus project. I started using this system since EPR was rolled out. I'm happy to see that there will be upgrading of various functions on the system. I have a couple of questions. On eHealth Plus, $1.4 billion of commitment will be involved. Will the administration consider having a comprehensive upgrading of this system? We've been talking about cross-boundary healthcare. The healthcare voucher scheme has been extended to the Greater Bay Area. People in the Greater Bay Area can now use the healthcare voucher from the Hong Kong government. Will this eHealth Plus allow people to check the outstanding balance of the vouchers, for instance? Some patients, they may not want certain doctors to have access to their personal information, especially those with mental illnesses. Will there be layers of protection or authentication for those who are using this system. This is a 5-year plan, and the administration is asking for $1.4 billion. Have you taken into account the need to upgrade the system in the future? Also, will the coverage of this system be expanded in the future to cope with any unforeseen medical situations or healthcare problems that may arise in the future? Also, have you assessed the efficiency and effectiveness of this system? Have you considered how many people will benefit from this system? You shouldn't just look at how many people are going to download this system. Instead, you should consider whether the functions will benefit the users. Well, in the last meeting, a couple of members asked about the functions of the system. Deputy Secretary. According to our development plan, eHealth Plus in the future will benefit as much as possible elderly people in the Greater Bay Area who are going to use our healthcare vouchers. For instance, they will be able to check the outstanding balance under the voucher scheme. So we're heading towards this direction when we design the functions of the system. On the question about insurance, we understand that stakeholders have different views on this. We have to take into account the completeness and integrity of users' medical history, as well as how sensitive people feel about their personal information being disclosed to other parties. We will look into this with relevant stakeholders. We might add in a couple of procedures so that certain information, if they are to be shared with other parties, certain requirements will have to be fulfilled. On potential upgrading of the system, we hope that this can be included within the 5-year plan. After the system has been run for a few years, there might be possibilities for us to further develop the system. If we have such plans, we'll come back to the LegCo and ask for relevant funding approval. Members who have read the paper would understand this. We're going to have different modules and components for this system. So there is a basic backbone with various components and modules. This allows us to build in further features if we want to do so in the future. Like other projects that ask for one-off funding, as we launch the eHealth Plus project, we will gauge the effectiveness and efficiency of the system. Reverend Peter Kuhn. Chairman, I have a simple question. I support the eHealth Plus project because this is a very good platform. In the past, people weren't very willing to try out new platforms like eHealth. What are the ways that the government will adopt to attract people to use the platform? Well, this is the third time members ask about how the government is going to attract people to use the platform. Deputy Secretary, from our citizens' perspectives, what is crucial is how this platform is going to help people deal with day-to-day needs in relation to their healthcare needs. We need to boost their confidence. For instance, relevant documentation function offered by the system will allow females to look after the healthcare needs of their children. We will step up publicity in this regard. For instance, children may, with the help of their parents, develop the habits of using eHealth Plus through different government subsidy schemes. For instance, through activities held by the Department of Health, through public services, including public healthcare programs that are launched yearly. We are going to migrate these programs into the eHealth Plus platform. We will allow for simple authentication for people who use this platform. And any data that is useful for users, they will be stored on the platform. As we migrate all the public healthcare programs and the relevant information to this platform, we believe people will start using this system more widely or extensively. I was going to draw a line here, but I see that there are more members who would like to speak, so maybe I'll wait a bit more. Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, Chairman. I think major participants of this system, or those who are interested in platforms that are the middle-aged, when eHealth Plus is upgraded, can we target middle-aged users and simplify procedures? For instance, can you use facial recognition technology or other types of technologies to allow more elderly people or middle-aged people to use the system? Deputy Secretary, as we continue to develop different functions for this platform, we will target users of different age groups, will target users with different habits to offer help to them through our interface design. We have done a bit of work in this regard already. We will, for instance, look at whether the registered user is an eligible user under the healthcare voucher scheme. And the design will be different based on the identity or the background of the registered users. The app may look different, and the procedures involved in logging in may also vary depending on the background of the registered users. Ms. Lillian Kwok, thank you. I have questions concerning paragraph 53. For item D, it accounts for $460 million. For item E, it involves $632 million. Item E concerns staffing cost. I want to know the average salary of the staff involved in developing this platform. For item E, says $632 million. It concerns professional and consultancy services. How many consultant firms are involved? Also, how much money will be spent on these companies? Can you give a breakdown in this regard?
Deputy Secretary. Mr. Eric Wong can tell us more in a moment, but a brief comment from me. The core development team is made up of people from the hospital authority and also the people they help recruit. Now, there are roughly 60 people on the core team. They are the management. This means they are senior doctors and also tech specialists. But 60 people cannot cover every single one of the more than 100 projects. So beyond the core team, we also engage individual service providers to develop the systems for a particular project. Some of that is covered under IT operation services. In that area, we procure services to cover the work in software development and hardware. Now, the number of people in that regard is more fluid. Mr. Eric Wong, Chief Systems Manager. Can we switch on the microphone for Mr. Dixon Wong? Now, on outsourcing the services, the hospital authority has 5 or 6 regular contractors. On mobile apps, cybersecurity, system monitoring, testing, and development, we have some regular partners to meet the different needs of our project. We find the best service providers in each area to help us with the development. Now, the outsourcing service takes up 50%, 40 to 50% of the expenditure under IT operation services. Now, we know there are 60 people. Can we have a detailed list of what those people do? I've heard about the healthcare workers and IT specialists, but what about product specialists or product designers? And how many structural engineers are there? How many IT workers and how many operation workers? Do we have a breakdown of those workers? Can we have a detailed breakdown about what those 60 people do and the expenses involved? Now, on the 5 to 6 outsourced service providers, are they mainland firms, local firms, or overseas firms? I want to find out more. What functions do those 5 or 6 providers cover? Mr. Dixon Wong. Now, first, on the 60 people on the team from HA, 28 are bioinformatics officers. These are doctors, healthcare professionals. They are familiar with the information systems in hospitals. There are 28 people. I was also looking for the expenditure, but he only gave me the number of people. Mr. Dixon Wong, Ms. Kwok is looking for a detailed breakdown, setting out the number of people involved, the work they do. You may want to provide us with the details after the meeting. How about you tell us more about the contractors? We have both local and mainland contractors, depending on the function we need. For more advanced functions, such as structural specialists, we need the kind of personnel. We will need local veterans in that area. In system development, there's programming and testing. We also have a contractor, in fact, several contractors from the mainland, because those offer services at lower fees. But the HA team will do the quality assurance. Chairman, can we also have the details of the 5 to 6 contractors? Can that be done? Yes. So 2 kinds of information Can we please get the authorities to provide that after the meeting? Mr. Tony Tse. I support smart city initiatives. We should move faster in going digital and going smart with government and public services. And that includes life and health services for people. I fully support this proposal about eHealth Plus. My concern is on the effectiveness. How do we get more private health care facilities and professionals to get involved? That is, using this system. Private healthcare institutions may see the information they have as proprietary. They own the information. So when it comes to sharing the data, will that undermine the competitiveness of the private healthcare professionals? Those facilities may see patients' data as a form of asset. Just 28% of dentists in the private sector use e-health. So what will the government do to fix this? At first, players in the private sector may not be willing to provide the data. So what can be done to encourage the private sector to share the data? And how can we achieve results on this matter? Last week, 2 members asked about this. They asked about depositing the data from private sector players. So can we invite the Deputy Secretary to tell us more? Mr. Tse raised a crucial matter. This requires a change in people's mindset. When people access healthcare services, data are generated. When this happens in the private sector, the data stay with the private sector institutions. But that data also belong to the patient. So you can think of e-health as a bank account. When the data are about the patient, that data should be stored onto the system so that when the patient goes to a doctor next time, that data can be retrieved with ease. So we need a change in thinking. And this change is already happening. Private healthcare providers can now distinguish between what belongs to those private clinics and what belongs to people. Chairman, I see many private hospitals take part in e-health, but for me, I don't see any data about me in e-health. I visited private hospitals in the past 2 to 3 years, but nothing in my e-health account. What can we do to get those private hospitals or clinics to put their data onto e-health? Deputy Secretary. Now, there are a few stumbling blocks even when patients or hospitals are willing to put data onto the system. There are tech solutions in the works and they will be ready soon. Or a clinic may have yet to secure the consent from people. People may have consented to access to that data by the healthcare professionals, but people haven't given the consent for that data to be put onto e-health. There will be tech solutions to address that. But when the tech is there and healthcare professionals fail to put the data onto e-health, we do not rule out the use of using the law to mandate the deposit of data onto e-health. Ms. Eunice Yong. I support e-health plus. eHealth Plus will give people access to their health records. This can also improve the efficiency of clinical management and also enables cross-sector and cross-boundary collaboration. eHealth Plus merits our support. Paragraph 11. Basically, all health records come from the public sector. But private hospitals and clinics also make up 60% of the number of access. So going forward, how can we promote the system in the private sector? How can we get more private hospitals to provide health data? Is something wrong with the publicity among private hospitals, or are there struggles that private hospitals are facing in putting data on e-health? Now, I want to ask about the e-imaging reports. Patients are supposed to be able to view their records. That's what the paper says. There's a QR code, and then the doctor or the hospital staff can see those imaging reports. We want people to be able to see their own health records. That matters. They should be able to see the records and download them. And then they can go to other experts. That would be a key function for eHealth Plus. So with e-imaging and e-laboratory report, can people access and download their own reports and images anytime, anywhere? Now I turn to paragraph 54. The recurrent expenditure every year will be $110 million. But in terms of the savings, hardware maintenance, update, and starting from 2029, savings will be $40 or so million. We're only talking about outdated software. That's not a saving. So by recurrent expenditure, does that cover all the hardware and software work? Is it just taking money from one pocket and putting it into another? So how did we arrive at the recurrent expenditure? 3 questions. First, about private hospitals. This is the 4th member to ask about private hospitals. First, we have partnerships. We find tech solutions for private hospitals to upload their health records onto eHealth with these. So we take that one step at a time. The second part of our approach is that we have collaborations with the private sector, procuring of healthcare services, for example. Private hospitals taking part in these schemes will also have a condition imposed on them, and that condition is to use e-health. Because when they take part in the scheme, health records are generated, stored, and checked. So we have this two-pronged approach that will help us to get private hospitals to provide and upload their health records. Now, on e-imaging and e-lab reports, we have to strike a balance. People access their health records and show them to another healthcare professional. So with the consent, other healthcare professionals will be able to see those images. On how much of that information people can view on their own, we are still considering how to approach this. What we have in mind is that people may not be able to see the truly technical detail of it. But the more accessible parts of the information, such as the results, the findings, may be something we can show on e-health. Now take medical reports as an example. We don't put every single detail on e-health, but the highlights, the key figures are already accessible on e-health. So we find the middle path. We want to provide something user-friendly that is not overwhelming with too much detail. Now, on the savings and the recurrent expenditure of $110 million, we already have e-health in place. The hardware and software require regular maintenance and update. When we update our systems or upgrade the systems, there will be some parts of the software that will no longer be needed, and we just present this single figure.
Mr. Kenneth Lau, the government is asking for some $1.3 billion to transform and upgrade the e-health system to expand the coverage and use of healthcare information. Users may be able to view various types of information on this platform, and this will bring benefits to people. $1.395 billion is not a small sum. The questions that I wanted to ask have been asked by other members. That include how to ensure sharing of information by both the public and private sector. Over 90% of the information is currently contributed by the public sector. There's relatively little information shared by the private sector. So the government needs to encourage the private sector to share the data. We're going to spend some $1.3 billion on this. If we don't have enough information, it's not going to be helpful. According to the government's paper, eHealth Plus can allow users to upload, deposit, or retrieve personal healthcare information. These include X-ray images and lab reports. Those who seek medical consultation outside of Hong Kong, they can also upload or retrieve information from the platform. Of course, users have the responsibilities to verify the information themselves. How do you ensure the accuracy and completeness of the information uploaded by users themselves? If wrong information is uploaded onto the platform, Would you blame the healthcare professionals instead? Would you add a function to verify users' information? Well, this question has not been asked by other members for sure. Deputy Secretary. For the first question asked by Mr. Lau, I'll give a brief answer. On information to be provided by private healthcare providers, this is definitely going to be a focus of our work. We'll encourage them to do so. For information uploaded by users themselves onto the platform, we will have special arrangement. What I mean is that there will be an inbox allowing users to deposit personal information onto the platform, and this will be separated from other information uploaded by healthcare providers. Of course, users will have to first give consent to healthcare providers to have access to all this information. This function allows healthcare providers to see which information is contributed by healthcare providers and what information is contributed by users themselves. For information uploaded by users, healthcare providers may want to make a judgment themselves on how accurate and reliable the information is. As we upgrade the system, we will come up with certain provisions to clarify the liabilities of users in terms of the information they upload onto the platform. For information that has nothing to do with the user's healthcare or health situation, we will ask perhaps the office overseeing the operation of the system to decide whether to remove such information. This is going to be the legal procedure involved. Well, Mr. Lau asked whether you will have a mechanism in place to verify the accuracy of the information uploaded by users themselves. For information uploaded by users, we will have a structural form of categorization. The function will show clearly which information is from users and which information is from healthcare providers. We may make use of AI to help us verify whether there is information uploaded by users that has nothing to do with their health conditions. Professor William Wong. Thank you, Chairman. I speak in support of the eHealth Plus project. I hope there will be more users of this system. eHealth was rolled out in 2021. There were some 3 million downloaders. Have you investigated into the age groups of the users? How do you encourage more elderly people aged 65 or above to use the system? Also, according to the paper, there will be an AI and machine learning platform. Technology can help us collect healthcare data. For the data collected, will they be only used by the hospital authority? Will the data be shared with universities or the academia? For instance, under Inno Hong Kong, we have an Life and Health Center. Will the data be shared with the center? Deputy Secretary. We have a similar number of people downloading the app as well as those registered to use eHealth. We are seeing more elderly people using the platform. younger people tend not to use the app or register to use e-health. We think our citizens need to turn this app into something that helps monitor their health conditions. We will do more in this regard in terms of encouraging people to use the app. It's understandable that there are more aged people who opt to use the system. This is because they benefit more from the public healthcare system and services. Many elderly people, they need to rely on e-health as a platform to manage their health. That's the first point. The second question raised by Professor Wong, it's important. E-health is a system used by both healthcare professionals and our citizens. It helps people navigate through the system and the care journey. We have 4 core strategies. One of the strategies is to make use of the big data platform. The big data platform is going to help the hospital authority to have more complete data. In the future, we want to make available data we have collected in research and development. This is our plan. If people give their consent, we can convert data into information that can benefit our research and development projects. Any follow-up questions? Well, this may involve different government departments. Certain data may not be able to be made public or be shared with other parties, so please take into consideration this point. Point noted. I said I would draw a line at some point. After I have drawn the line, only 5 members are waiting to speak. They are Mr. Tang Fei, Mr. Jesse Shang, Mr. Michael Lee, Mr. Dennis Leung, and Ms. Carmen Khan. After these 5 members have spoken, I'll put this item to vote. Mr. Tang Fei. Thank you, Chairman. I am concerned about the number of people who register to use the platform. The government is spending so much money on this. We want as many people as possible to use this platform, be it healthcare professionals or ordinary members of the public. According to paragraph 4, apart from Chinese medicine practitioners, well, other types of healthcare professionals, the usage rate is not over 50%. What are the reasons for healthcare professionals not using the platform? Say for optometrists, they may not have to have full knowledge of a patient's medical history in order to make a diagnosis. This is understandable. For Chinese medicine practitioners, I believe it's better for them to have an idea of the patient's medical history. Have you studied the reasons why the registration rate is lower than 50% for healthcare professionals? Also, 11 types of data will be covered under the platform. Have you looked into why people aren't enthusiastic about using the e-health platform? Some elderly people may not be tech-savvy enough to use the platform. For others, they may not want to share their health records with doctors. Well, I don't quite understand this because doctors are supposed to be the ones that we trust when we get sick. If you give more information to doctors, it will allow doctors to understand your health condition more comprehensively. How come people with certain illnesses, they do not want to use the e-health platforms? Why do they not want doctors to have access to their health records?
Deputy Secretary, the first question about the participation rate of different healthcare professionals. Now, some healthcare professionals don't see the system as particularly relevant to their professions yet. Now, we pay particular attention to dentists and Chinese medicine practitioners. Those two professionals don't need the data on e-health so often at this point, but based on their professional needs, we will come up with modules to meet the needs of dentists and PCM practitioners. For dentists, in particular, we will have a page for dentists. When people go to a dentist, a record is generated. Those dental records are different from what you see after you visit the GP. So we will have this module containing dental records. Dentists put in the information. This means after you visit dentist A, the record is generated. Dentist B can find the record on eHealth and they won't have to check everything again. So once we have those different modules, we will see more healthcare professionals registered for eHealth. At the last meeting, I answered questions about CM practitioners. Once we have the right modules in place, we will see more healthcare professionals registered on eHealth. Now, the other question about why people hesitate to sign up for eHealth. It's not that people have sensitive information, they don't want that on eHealth. Some people have the misconception. They have this mistaken belief that they lose control over the information they put on eHealth. eHealth is developed by the government. We do not sell people's data on eHealth. People can think of eHealth as a storage box. People have control over who has access to the healthcare records. A person can choose to refuse access even to a doctor. We do not encourage that, but people have control over who gets to see the healthcare records. eHealth is there to help people manage their healthcare records. People have control. And we will also invite members to help us spread this message to promote eHealth. Mr. Shang Hailong. A declaration. I'm a consultant with an AI company. I'm also a member of a committee of the Hospital Authority. It's 15 years since eHealth first came out. The platform evolved over time. This platform linked up public and private sector healthcare information. It's now also going to the rest of the Greater Bay Area. It's 15 years. We should keep moving with this system. This proposal will cost just shy of $1.4 billion. It's a huge sum. eHealth is a commonly used app. The other commonly used app is I Am Smart. When you compare eHealth and I Am Smart side by side, eHealth costs way more. Of course, this has to do with the management involved for eHealth. But as a electrical member, I do have some points to make on behalf of people. So this money, $1.4 billion, this will not be spent in one go. This will cover 5 years. So we should look at annual or half-yearly cycles, and then we at electrical should get updated regularly to make sure this proposal moves in the right direction. The landscape changes in technology every year, so it would be normal to see adjustments halfway through. We talked about HA Go and I'm Smart and how those two apps interact with eHealth. So I want to say that HA Go should be merged with eHealth, and we also need deep integration between eHealth and I'm Smart. People go to their I'm Smart app, they can see an A&E waiting time. And when people check HA Go, they see their monthly bills. And then with eHealth, they can see their images, medical images. We have several apps for the data of just each person. That makes little sense. So we need to integrate these apps and we need to link out these apps. Now, on data usage, once eHealth Plus has all our healthcare data, that app will be very valuable to preventive medicine. I hope the Health Bureau can consider this. Now, there are people who have recently settled in Hong Kong. There are 200,000 cases approved under the talent admission schemes. This means we will see 400,000 new arrivals in Hong Kong. The Health Bureau needs to plan ahead to promote eHealth Plus. We should promote the app to the new arrivals, the new arriving talent. 4 questions. Now, the question about merging HA Go and eHealth Plus has been raised for the 6th time. We will be happy to update electrical, especially the panel on health services, regularly on the app. We will be happy to share our achievements, the milestones for eHealth Plus. Now, on how the different apps interact with each other, HA Go, I'm Smart, eHealth Plus, and other portal apps from the government. Indeed, we should consolidate the different apps. I'm Smart is a portal. It covers many different functions. Now, on big data for preventive medicine, we will be happy to open up the data for preventive medicine. But even before we get to that point, the data we gather will help the hospital authority. Now, for the new arrivals and talent, we will also consider them in our publicity campaigns. Next, Mr. Michael Lee. I support this proposal about going from eHealth to eHealth Plus. We have to show people tangible results. Different kinds of information are already available on eHealth. Many members have already commented on different aspects of this proposal. There is much collaboration between Chinese medicine and doctors these days. Can we put CM medicine prescription on eHealth so that other CM practitioners can see what medicine has been prescribed for a patient? People believe in Chinese medicine, especially in preventive medicine, stroke care, and palliative care. CM works. So how do we facilitate collaboration between Chinese and Western medicine through eHealth Plus? Now, of course, data sharing should only happen with patients' consent. And now I turn to insurance. Will people be able to take out insurance in the mainland through eHealth Plus? And will the grade 3A hospitals from the mainland enter health records on a par with the records from Hong Kong's hospitals? Now, other members have also asked about Chinese medicine. Even with the existing e-health system, there are CM health records. CM practitioners and doctors can see the health records from the other side. But not many CM practitioners currently use eHealth. Now, of course, CM practitioners can see the previous CM treatment the patient received. Now, CM practitioners also see the history in collaboration between CM practitioners and doctors. Now, people may have received magnetic resonance imaging or had X-ray taken. To share this kind of information, some kind of harmonization in standards is needed. Without overcoming this issue, CM practitioners will see little incentive to use eHealth. Our Chinese medicine hospital, once it opens, will be a great place to test things out. It will be a great testing ground for collaboration between CM practitioners and doctors. So we're already in discussion with the Chinese Medicine Hospital's team. We'll find a way to better integrate and facilitate collaboration. So that will be helpful. Now, for records from grade 3A hospitals in the mainland, can we have interoperability between those records and Hong Kong hospitals' records? And with cross-boundary healthcare technology, There will be a time when we can link up the data. But the mainland and Hong Kong have different medical standards in terms of the technical standards. Before we harmonize these standards, people can still put health records from the mainland in e-health through cross-boundary collaboration. We will keep an eye on development and then review whether we can go deeper.
Mr. Dennis Leung, thank you, Chairman. We are trying to build a digital government services in order to provide more convenience to the public. Well, the e-health system is helping us achieve that purpose, and I think it's necessary to have such a system. As we see more advanced technological development, we should upgrade the functions on this system. So I support the funding proposal. I'd like to ask about some details of this project. On computer software, the budget for this in the 5-year plan is that an operating system software will be procured. What will be the arrangement for this? Why is this operating system software have to be procured? Also, there's going to be a development team for system development. Apart from government staff, will contractors be involved in the development team? Will the government have to ask for funding approval for more manpower, because some people may be assigned to work in the development team and the government will have to fill the relevant vacancies? On IT operation services, a great sum of money is involved for communication work. Why is such a large sum required for the 5-year development? How would the development help satisfy users' needs in terms of the functions of the system? On communication with stakeholders, members have previously asked this question. Deputy Secretary. In terms of the composition of the development team, the government will, through a one-off funding approval, invite members of the core teams to work in the development team. The hospital authority, through its IT department, is going to help us identify the right healthcare professionals and candidates to recruit people for the development team. This is for system development. IT operation services include communication with stakeholders. Apart from day-to-day communication, We have to see how we can make use of the expertise of different stakeholders to help develop the system. For technical interfacing, we may need certain software or systems. We have to make use of these tools. We also have to offer incentives and financial assistance to private healthcare providers so that they can act as pioneers and participate in our pilot scheme. So this is part of the communication with stakeholders. Communication does not only involve publicity. We have to offer incentives to certain stakeholders to take part in the pilot scheme, and there is cost incurred in this. How about the operating system? In this 5-year plan, we have every year 20 to 30 items. We want to achieve cost effectiveness. We may put in more resources as we roll out the system and procure more operating system software. Ms. Carmen Khan, I am concerned about critical infrastructure security. The government enacted legislation to protect critical infrastructure. Paragraphs 44 and 45 of the paper mention that the core infrastructure was first launched some 10 years ago, and the system is going to be converted into an integrated platform. I want to ask about Annex 4. Page 2 of Annex 4. The cost involved is about $126 million, which accounts for 1/10 of the total cost in terms of safeguarding the security of the system. Is this amount of money that is going to be put in comparable to the amount spent for other types of cybersecurity projects? Well, the U.S. is dealing with cybersecurity issues for the health group, and earlier this year we saw cyber attacks against the cybersecurity systems of various public organizations. Well, you've consulted different parties on this system, and will you adjust the budget on cybersecurity based on the consultation results? Deputy Secretary, I'll ask Mr. Wong to tell you more about the budget. On security issues, e-health is a system developed by the government. It's not subject to the legislation that is currently being promoted by the Security Bureau. However, we will have to meet the government standards in terms of the level of security for this system. We will keep in communication with the Security Bureau to ensure that this system will not become a shortcoming of the government's systems. Mr. Wong, on cybersecurity, it is our top priority as we design and allocate resources to develop this system. This is not part of the government's cybersecurity critical infrastructure. But we are achieving the requirements and goals set by the government in terms of cybersecurity. Different organizations are suffering from cyber attacks. Every time we see such an attack, we conduct an internal review on our existing infrastructure to see if it has the capacity to cope with such cyber attacks. We engage third-party consultants or experts to help us carry out risk assessments. Chairman, e-health is part of the government system, but it is not regulated by the government under the legislation. You said that 6 million users are using the platform. This is great, but we have to be concerned about the potential cyber security risks. I would assume that a healthcare system like this that involves so many users would be considered as a critical infrastructure that would be regulated by the new legislation. I hope the government will think about this. This system involves some 6 million users. Would you consider including eHealth Plus into part of the critical infrastructure to be regulated? I asked about whether enough budget is allocated to safeguarding the cybersecurity of the system, as 1/10 of the budget is going to be spent on cybersecurity. Deputy Secretary. For digital systems that are not regarded as part of the critical infrastructure to be regulated, it doesn't mean that they do not have to fulfill the requirements and standards set by the government. The OGCIO has set a very high standards for cybersecurity, and this standard is higher than that have to be fulfilled by other types of critical infrastructure. So Ms. Carmen Khan can be rest assured about this. I'll see if there is a direct comparison on how much money we dedicate to ensure the cybersecurity of the system, whether it is comparable to other types of projects. I'll now put this item, FCR bracket 2024, 25, 26 to vote. For those in favor, please raise their hands. Anyone against this proposal? No? I think members present are in favor of this proposal. I declare this proposal passed. Item 3. FCR 2024-25-21. This item invites members to approve an increase in the approved commitment by $0.5 billion from $1 to $1.5 billion under Head 138, Government Secretariat, Development Bureau, Planning and Lands Branch, Subhead 700, General Non-Recurrent Item 803, Funding Scheme to support the use of vacant government sites by NGOs and the implementation of the enhancements. The Development Bureau consulted the Development Panel on this proposal on the 28th of November last year. We have with us Ms. Doris Ho, Permanent Secretary for Development, Ms. Ingrid Yu, Principal Assistant Secretary for Development, and Ms. Sandy Sin, Chief Estate Surveyor from the Lands Department, to address members' questions. I'll first invite Chairman of the Development Panel, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, to tell us about the discussion.
Chairman, at the meeting of the Panel on Development on the 28th of November 2023, we discussed this proposal about increasing the approved commitment from $1 billion to $1.5 billion for this scheme about funding to support the use of vacant government sites by non-government organizations. Members generally supported this proposal. Members expressed concern about the progress and effectiveness of the funding scheme and also suggested that the government should set time limits or deadlines to monitor works progress. Now, on the cost effectiveness of the funding scheme, members asked about the possibility of renewing the short-term tenancies of vacant government premises and also whether the government would look at the success, such as the usage and number of visitors in deciding on renewal matters, and also whether the government would consider regularizing the funding scheme. The government replied that it would provide further information on the cost effectiveness when the funding proposal is put to the FC. Members also expressed concern over the struggles NGOs had in preparing the technical documents for taking forward the works. Members argued the government should provide not just financial support, but also technical advice and guidelines on technical matters. The government responded to the questions and concerns raised by members. That's all from me. Thank you, Dr. Low. 15 members are waiting to speak. I will read out their names in this order. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, Ms. Chen Yut-ming, Mr. Lam Chun-sing, Dr. Wendy Hong, Mr. Scott Leung, Dr. Tan Yue-hang, Mr. Andrew Lam, Mr. Tang Fei, Mr. Kit Sen-yang, Mr. Kenneth Lau, Ms. Lam So-wai, Dr. So Chun-wing, Professor Priscilla Leung, Mr. Gary Chen, followed by Ms. Judy Chen. We will start with Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Chairman. I support the increase in the approved commitment along with the enhancements. Paragraph 10 and 11 for sites larger than 2,000 square meters and sites without vehicular access, the funding cap will rise to $70 million per project. There will also be a $2 million cap on the expenses on preparing technical documents. I support these enhancements because they are welcome proposals. Now, I turn to my questions. Now, the commitment will go up by $500 million. Roughly $987 million has been spent. Now, we need $500 million for the future. So for those vacant government sites, the government has a database of such vacant sites. By asking for an extra $500 million in commitment, does the government already know that the vacant sites available warrant just $500 million? Now, under this proposal, sites over 2,000 square meters will see a higher funding cap, $70 million. But when a site is both larger than 2,000 square meters and without vehicular access, the funding cap goes up to $80 million. But I'm thinking when you have just 6 or 7 applications for sites meeting both conditions, that $500 million will be used up. So does the government already know that its vacant sites warrant this amount? Now, in enclosure 1, we see information about the cost effectiveness. I see the number of beneficiaries. It's good to have the details. But I'm looking at item 9, Maipo. This is about non-profit making school for school children with special educational needs. 20 students benefited from the scheme. So we're benefiting just 20 to 30 students, and the land may be taken back in a few years' time. Now, I don't dwell on specific cases, But I have a question about the cost effectiveness. So, on the list of projects, are there projects that do not meet the intention when we first granted those STTs? So, two questions from the member. We asked for $1 billion when we created the commitment. We had 29 projects in mind. Now we're asking for an extra $500 million. This time we also propose several enhancements to slightly increase the funding cap for some projects. Those cover large projects only. For many projects in the past, the sites were smaller than 2,000 square meters. So the 500, or rather, $500 million or $500 million can cover 10 or so projects. It would depend on the funding needed for each of those projects and the size of the sites involved. Now, on the long-term plan, we still have to consider that we're asking for $500 million. We want to cover another 10 projects. When we are approaching the limit of the commitment again, we will review the scheme and decide whether to ask for a higher commitment. That depends on whether we can secure the extra resources. Now, on the cost effectiveness, we are conscious that we are using public money. So cost effectiveness is top of mind for us. We consider whether the project costs make sense. That for the projects that have started, the number of beneficiaries are in line with what was anticipated. Once the projects are completed, our officers visit those projects to make sure the sites are put to good use. We do have these measures to monitor the use. Ms. Chen Yutming. I want to declare an interest. One short-term tenancy project, it's in Ta Kwu Lang School. I am an alumna of that school, so I will not take part in the voting on this item. We note your declaration. Mr. Lam Chen Sing. Thank you, Chairman. Funding has been granted for 29 projects. 15 have been completed and commenced operation. 3 projects will start their construction works. 11 projects will see site investigation and preliminary works. Those projects will start their works. For past projects, were most of them completed on time, or do we see many delays? We support granting the money to NGOs for the service, but the works should be completed on time so that the services can start soon. So I want to find out how things went in the past. Now, if there were many delays, the works saw delays and could not benefit the public, what can the government do? Just then, the permanent secretary told us the $500 million will cover 10 or so projects. 29 projects were approved. Do you see many applicants for these projects? So I want to get a sense of the demand. Do small and medium NGOs apply to the scheme? I want to find out what kinds of NGOs tend to apply to the scheme. Now I want to write on Mr. Chen Xiu-hong's question. For some projects, they benefited more than 10,000 people. Other projects benefited just 20 or 30 people. Of course, each project varies in nature and the people they target. The PS told us each NGO sets out the people they target when they first file the application. But does the government monitor the outcome? When the NGOs submit the proposals, does the government assess whether those targets make sense? So 3 questions. First, project delay. Second, is the $500 million enough? And 3, cost effectiveness. Most projects were completed on time. The Development Bureau provides funding. We also have a cross-professional team made up of engineers and surveyors who provide technical advice to NGOs. Experience shows most projects were completed on time. COVID had an impact on the project, but then afterwards, the projects were completed on time. On whether the $500 million is enough, now I can share some figures. This project started in 2019. More than 80 STTs were granted. Some are vacant government sites, others vacant school premises. 80 odd STTs. We believe $1 billion can cover roughly 30 projects. Some NGOs have the means to undertake the works. In other cases, the works are minor in nature, so government funding is not needed. Now, on whether $500 million is enough. Now, in our honest assessment, the member made the great point. This funding scheme can help small and medium NGOs. They may want to try new services. Our funding scheme can help such NGOs. With members' support, if we secure this extra $500 million, we will keep reviewing the matter to see if more money is needed. Now, on the number of beneficiaries, we have to look at the surface alongside the number of beneficiaries. In some projects, you see 20 or 30 beneficiaries. Those have to do with special educational needs, schools, kindergartens. Those projects tend to benefit fewer people. because in those cases, small classes are found. But when you help 20 to 30 students, you are helping 20 to 30 families. The success of a project is more than just about the number of direct beneficiaries. Government funding is spent on restoring those sites. Of course, we want more people to benefit. If an NGO can serve more people, then we encourage those NGOs to expand their services within that site.
Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you, Chair. Allowing NGOs to make use of vacant government sites, I support the idea. However, at the panel, I made it clear that I would object the proposal, that is to increase the approved commitment by $500 million. The scheme was launched in 2019. A funding of $1 billion was approved. It's been a few years now, and the government is now asking for another $500 million. I don't find this reasonable. The ceiling is $60 million for NGOs. In the future, the amount is going to be raised to $80 million. The tenancy term ranges from 1 to 5 years. The vacant sites will only be used for a few years. This is very wasteful. You renew the tenancy every 3 years, but it is not for sure that you will renew the tenancy agreement. NGOs cannot run the site in the long term. I think you need comprehensive planning. Currently, there are 29 projects under the scheme. Some require the building of temporary structures. I have reservation about these structures. We have transitional housing, we have makeshift hospitals, we have many transitional housing. We don't have a comprehensive plan to demolish these temporary structures. For temporary structures that are not going to be put in use, how are you going to deal with them? This will cause environmental problems. That's why I have reservation about these structures. The government is asking for $500 million. When are you going to cap the commitment? There are 52 vacant government sites that can be open to NGOs for application. $500 million is not enough for NGOs to run all these vacant sites. Are you going to ask for another funding approval? I see that among these projects, one is an animal shelter in Yunlong. It's going to be put into use for some 2 years, and a dozen of stray dogs will be taken care of. The tenancy has expired and the tenancy agreement got renewed, but we don't know when it will be renewed again. Another project is in Yunlong. It got some $13 million of funding, some 40 or some 80 stray dogs and cats were being taken care of. The site was about 4,000 square meters. These projects in total cost over $100 million. Well, I love animals, but is it appropriate that we have so many of these animal shelters? Are we putting taxpayers' money into good use? The scheme was launched in 2019. We had $1.17 trillion of fiscal reserve. That's why we approved the funding. But situation is different now. We have to cut down on expenditure and we have to open up revenue sources. We are seeing two major tax reforms. We have the two-tier tax for income tax. We also have the progressive rating system for rates. And in total, we're only going to get less than $1 billion of revenue. So we have to cut down on expenditure. So I object this proposal for unnecessary services. Well, the questions cover quite a number of areas. Permanent Secretary, will you address them one by one? One of the concerns of members is that these projects concern short-term tenancies. You have an upfront cost to renovate the sites, but these are for short-term tenancy applications, and this might not be cost-effective. Paragraph 3 of the paper mentions that these vacant government sites or vacant school premises are not used by government departments, and therefore, through open tender, we invite NGOs to run these sites as, for instance, temporary car parks. We have done rounds of review and we see that other government departments are not going to use these sites. There is a low chance for government departments to make use of these sites. Well, we call these STTs, and STTs may last for 3 years or at most 7 years. When an STT expires, we renew the tenancy quarterly. We call this STT, but if there is no need for the government to take back the site, we would continue to renew the tenancy agreements. So there shouldn't be a cost-effectiveness issue or concern. Member asked whether we would continue to ask for funding approval apart from this $500 million. When we have used up this $500 million, we will see if there is a need for us to ask for another funding. If we need further funding approval, we'll come back to the LegCo to see if members would endorse our proposal to increase the approved commitment. Member mentioned about the 3 animal shelters. There's a reason why there were these 3 animal shelters. They take care of stray dogs and cats. Another function of these animal shelters is to help with the development of new development areas. When we asked for funding approval for new development areas, there were members who were concerned that we would take back all the land and no one would take care of the stray dogs and cats in the areas. AFCD is going to help with this. There were members who suggested that we should ask NGOs to help look after stray dogs and cats in the areas. We think that this funding scheme is going to help us take care of the animals. These animal shelters that we're talking about are not only offering shelters to dozens of cats and dogs. They are encouraging people in Hong Kong to help take care of these animals as pets. Mr. Scott Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I support the funding proposal to encourage NGOs to make use of vacant government sites. I'd like to ask about cost effectiveness as well. The projects require funding of a few $1 million or hundreds of $millions. A government paper mentions that there is an assessment scheme. An assessment committee is in place under the Development Bureau? Well, the Development Bureau will chair the committee, and there are members who help vet applications. These projects cover education and other areas, including animals, protection, and so on. The assessment committee is chaired by the Development Bureau. I'm not questioning the capability of government staff. I'm just wondering if the government has enough knowledge about these projects. I see that there is a mechanism asking NGOs to submit reports regularly. How many people are benefiting from these projects? Are they actually benefiting from these projects? Can we have experts make the assessment to see whether these projects are beneficial for the public? Say an NGO may want to run a culinary center teaching people how to cook. It is hard to gauge whether people who enroll in programs offered by the culinary center are actually learning how to cook. I just want to make sure that the projects are cost effective. Permanent Secretary. The member asked 2 questions. The first one is about the assessment committee. It's a cross-departmental committee. Do members have enough expertise and knowledge to decide whether the projects are cost-effective? Footnote 9 of the paper tells you about where the members are from. There are people from CEDD, Fire Services Department, and Architectural Services Department, etc. Say, the Architectural Services Department can give us advice on restoration works. Drainage Services Department can give us advice on drainage works, and CEDD can give us advice on road works. When we assess the applications, we try to make comparisons. For road works, we see if the unit cost is comparable to similar types of works or projects. So we make a comprehensive analysis as we vet the applications. There are different departments working in this assessment committee that serve as gatekeepers here. Member asked about the cost effectiveness of the projects, whether the projects are actually benefiting the community. Let me give you some more background information. When a project comes to the Development Bureau, we ask the applicant or the operator to first get the STT of the vacant site or vacant school premises. If an STT is secured, it means the NGO concerned has already received the policy support from the relevant bureau to make use of the vacant site for community purposes. When the project comes to us, we look at the works. We have to be the gatekeeper. When the works are completed, a dedicated team regularly visits the site to see if the vacant site is being made use of effectively. We also look at the original proposal included in the application. If we see that there is potential for the project to benefit more people, we would talk to the operator. This is part of the discussion we have with NGOs.
講員嘅意思呢啲
Mr. Scott Leung's point is that the feedback from the beneficiaries also matters. Dr. Tan Yueheng. Thank you, Chairman. I support this proposal. The $1 billion enabled community organizations to serve their functions. There are also economic benefits, but we have to look at the social benefits. This funding scheme started in 2019. 29 projects were approved. 92,000 square meters of government sites revitalized. Now the government is asking for $500 million. How did the government arrive at this sum? How much government controls there over the 92,000 square meters of land? How much demand is there for such land from NGOs? Say there's huge demand. Will we be looking at larger amounts than $500 million? When will the government revisit this matter? Is it 3 or 5 years from now? Short-term tenancies are granted with lengths ranging from 1 to 5 years, longest at 7 years, but the STTs are usually 1 to 5 years in length. When the land is granted for a short time, land formation is needed. So when we grant a land and then we take it back, will we prioritize the same kind of activity when we grant the same site again? Now, on service centers, schools for children with special educational needs, that kind of need or demand is a long-standing or long-term demand. But those organizations are securing the land with short-term tenancies. Those NGOs will need the land on the long term. So have we given thought to this recurrent renewal so that those NGOs can keep using the land? So 2 questions. One, $500 million, is that enough? And second, can we prioritize the use of the same site for similar or the same kind of activities? And question 3 is, can we lease out those sites on a longer term? Now, the first question, whether there was a very rigorous approach in arriving at the sum, an extra $500 million. We looked at past applications, the money NGOs asked for, and also the resources we have. Some members wondered, since money is tight, whether we should be more cautious with spending money. So after considering a basket of factors, we decided to ask for an extra $500 million. As to when we will ask for a higher commitment again, we keep this matter under regular review. once we approach the limit of this extra $500 million and we see a need, we will come to electrical again. Members wonder, these short-term tendencies last for a short time but involve huge investments. These short-term tendencies can last up to 7 years for each tendency. Now, if no other government departments want those sites back, indeed, this is often the case, in this scenario, we will allow that NGO to keep using the land. It's common for NGOs to be able to use the same site for more than 10 years, as long as no government department needs that site. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you. A declaration. I serve an NGO. That NGO has acquired funding from this scheme, and that project is in operation. Now, a bit of experience from my own experience. For a transitional housing project, a former character center has been converted into transitional housing, offering 1 to 2 person units. Different requirements apply when you use the site for a temporary purpose or a long-term purpose. The government plays safe. It sticks to the highest, most rigorous standards in vetting applications. But that may not be the best way forward when public money is involved. So, in vetting future applications, can the government also bear in mind the nature of the project in an application? You may not need to follow the strictest standard if an application is just for a short-term use. Now I turn to some questions about the figures. Since 2019, more than 80 projects have been covered by this funding scheme. 30 or so projects obtained funding. How many rejected applications were there? From 2024 to 2029, I'm looking at 2027 and 2029. There's a dip in the number. So I just want to confirm. I want to confirm that the government is not saying that at that point, by 2027 and 29, application numbers will fall because there won't be so many sites around. So 2 questions. 1, number of rejected applications, and 2, the dip in applications from 2027 onwards. There is no unsuccessful application. When an application has the assessment committee support, we try to support those projects. When short-term projects are involved, whether we should adjust the standards we follow. We understand where the member is coming from, but we have to bear in mind that when safety is at stake, we have to take it very seriously. On nice to have features, we approach that with caution. The third question from the member is about the last 2 years. Why there's a drop in the last 2 years? We're asking for an extra $500 million. The cash flow drops in the last 2 years because we won't be granting new projects in the last 2 years. That's the main reason. Thank you. Mr. Tang Fei. I support this proposal. The government is not letting vacant sites sit idle. Those idle sites are given to different bodies for different activities. I support this approach. These sites are for non-profit making purposes. It's good to have different uses. On the assessment committee, more than 10 professional departments are involved. So my question is, government sites are involved. There are cultural, recreational activities. In or before 2019, organizations held political activities, possibly endangering national security. We now have the Safeguarding National Security Ordinance and the National Security Law. The social atmosphere is no longer what it was. But you can never be sure. People hold cultural, recreational, non-profit making activities on government sites. And when something is suspected to endanger national security or to be in breach of other criminal laws. Now, I see the Fire Services Department on the assessment committee, but can we have the police force or other departments under the Security Bureau on this assessment committee? You don't want to find out only after the event that someone uses vacant school premises for activities that people frown on. So this question is about guarding against the use of vacant sites for activities endangering national security. We don't have departments under the SB on this assessment committee. We do take national security seriously. Earlier this year, in the application guidelines, and also in the funding agreement we signed with NGOs, we inserted provisions about safeguarding national security. When necessary, the government can take action. We do pay attention to this. The Development Bureau and also the policy bureaus that give policy support for these applications make sure those uses will not endanger national security. Mr. Kenneth Lau. Our economy is struggling to recover. Our fiscal deficit will be more than $100 billion. People will be watching closely how the government spends money, and they want to make sure the government puts public money to good use. So we will be scrutinizing any funding proposal in great detail. This proposal is about giving funding to NGOs to use vacant government sites. This is about an extra $500 million in the commitment. Now, paragraph 11 says some vacant sites lack vehicular access because they are in rural areas. That's why NGOs and social enterprises hesitate to use those sites. That's why the government wants to offer more funding, and this means more money is involved. Now, for these inaccessible sites, when we offer more funding and attract more NGOs to use those sites, If these sites are so remote, people won't be able to enjoy those sites. So shouldn't that extra $10 million be spent on improving the transport links instead? Better transport links would be more helpful. Shouldn't that be the case?
The question is about how to facilitate people to use the site with vehicular access. Well, this is a chicken and egg issue. We have made observations ourselves. We see that some NGOs, they want to make use of school premises or vacant government sites. However, there is no vehicular access to the sites, and they give up on the idea of using these sites. We see that there are sites without vehicular access, and we therefore want to increase the funding for NGOs who opt to use these sites so that we can have direct vehicular access and that more people will be able to use these sites and that more people will benefit from the relevant projects. And having direct vehicular access will also help improve the fire safety provisions. And we want the construction costs to be reasonable for building the vehicular access. We think that by increasing the funding, we might be able to encourage NGOs to use sites without vehicular access. Ms. Connie Lam. Thank you, Chair. I support the funding scheme to support the use of vacant government sites by NGOs. Since 2019, this scheme helps revitalize 92,000 square meters of vacant government sites. Social welfare organizations are in need of sites. I've talked to government officials about this. We have talked about policies benefiting carers. We talked about how to revitalize vacant government sites. In all 18 districts in Hong Kong, we need carer support centers to allow carers to take breaks and to share their experiences with each other. Carers are under great pressure, and they need such centers. I have a couple of questions about the scheme. I looked at the funded projects. Well, how many more projects do you think will benefit from the funding scheme? And what areas or what services will be involved in these funded schemes and projects? How are you going to monitor the operation of the NGOs? Are there any NGOs who applied for the scheme but left the vacant sites unused? Would you consider disqualifying these NGOs if they do not actually make use of the sites after they make a successful application? Also, do you take follow-up actions to assess the projects funded to ensure cost effectiveness and the long-term development of the community? Also, is there a mechanism in place to enhance transparency about these funded projects? Do you make information known to the public? Do you tell the public about what kind of facilities there are in the community? It is only with publicity that you can draw people to make use of these facilities. Well, there are 4 major questions. One about the number of NGOs applying for the scheme and funding. On transparency of funded projects, we have briefly touched on this question just now. Permanent Secretary, we are going to have an extra $500 million. We believe it will benefit an extra dozen of projects. What kind of projects will benefit from the scheme? Well, there are a couple of NGOs who have approached us, and different projects are involved. Some concern sports, and they might be sports popular among people. There are also potential projects that are going to help people with disabilities. And all these projects are in line with our goals and visions for this funding scheme. We want the community to be creative. After having the funding, it is up to the NGOs to decide how they're going to make use of the vacant sites. And we want to leave the flexibility for NGOs to come up with their own ideas. We understand the importance of monitoring the progress of the funded projects. We disperse the funding by installments. For the first stage, we let the NGOs to carry out studies, and when it shows that the project is cost effective, we disperse the second stage of funding. We sign service agreements and funding agreements with NGOs, and we disperse the funding by installments on a reimbursement basis. After the NGOs secure fundings, they have to submit reports to us regularly. They also have to submit audited financial statements to us. Member suggestion is great. We also want to step up publicity. We want people to benefit from the services provided by NGOs that have successfully made the applications with us. Every year, we go to the development panel and report to members about the progress of the funded projects, and this serves as a platform for us to report to members what kind of services the NGOs are bringing to the community. There are a couple of members who have asked how the government monitor the progress of the project, so you can see that members are concerned about this. Dr. So Chun-Wing. I, in principle, support the funding proposal. The Permanent Secretary said a few times that the vacant sites are not in use by government departments, and that's why they're open to the NGOs. And these projects run by NGOs can benefit the public, so I support the funding scheme. Does the government cover all the costs or expenditure for each project, or do NGOs have to chip in themselves? If you do not cover all the expenditure, how do you ensure that the money put into each project is reasonable? Money involved in each project, the sum is not small. I went to one of the sites in Quarry Bay, and the project required some $60 million. I can't say if it is a worthy cause, but I want to know how you ensure that the spending of the money is reasonable. Was the money spent in a reasonable manner? Was too much money put into the project? Well, there are currently 29 projects under the scheme. You're asking for another $500 million, which are going to benefit over 10 other projects. The government has the responsibility to review the 29 projects to see which ones are beneficial to the public, which ones are effective. For those that aren't cost effective or fail to achieve the government's expectations, would you consider reviewing these projects and decide how the extra $500 million can be spent more effectively? Will you review the 29 existing projects under the scheme? Permanent Secretary. We have funded 29 projects under the scheme. Some projects cost $60 million, and even with the $60 million, it's not enough for the NGO concerned to run the site, and they have to look for other money sources or other funding. Say one NGO runs a food bank on the site, and the funding required was $60 million. And we understand that $60 million were not enough, and the NGO concerned has to ask for further funding from the Jockey Club. And the project mentioned just now in the Quarry Bay Harbor Fund, we know that the NGO concerned asked for other sponsorship. We don't want NGOs to rely on the government only, because the most we can give is $60 million. We welcome public-private partnership. My question is, how do you monitor the effectiveness of the project? You are dedicating $60 million for a lot of the projects. On the question about monitoring, there were members who've asked similar questions previously. Well, I'll be brief. How do we monitor the progress of the project? Before we approve the funding, the NGO would have to submit a budget plan to us on what kind of works will be carried out, and the development bureau will see if the plan is reasonable. Say the plan is reasonable, the budget is reasonable, then we will disperse funding based on the progress of the works. We have a dedicated team that monitor the progress of the works and how the money is spent. The funding is dispersed on a reimbursement basis. It is only if the works has achieved a certain progress that we would disperse further funding to the NGOs. This is how we monitor the projects. Well, a couple of members have already asked questions about how the government monitors the progress of the projects. If such questions come up again, I will ask the Permanent Secretary to give a brief answer. Otherwise, time would be wasted.
Professor Priscilla Leung, I support this proposal. We should be making better use of vacant sites and vacant school premises. Now, with this extra $500 million, when will the government come back for even more money? Does the government have a list of projects in mind Paragraph 14 mentions arts, cultural, sports activities. I have gone through the list. So how do we create greater vibrancy in the community through engagement? I looked at the list of STTs. The social enterprises tend to be rather passive in what they do. So if we can get more businesses involved, we can get those SEs to be more active. Usually those SEs are short of money. After a while, they fold. So can we be more active? I visited Shatin, the Patriotic Education Resource Center. That center sits on vacant school premises. Now, if we have vacant school premises in other districts, can we have such centers? It's best to have such resource centers in each district. A single such center cannot accommodate visitors from all over Hong Kong. Since we are thinking about vacant school premises, we need some kind of planning. So, can we have a patriotic education resource center in each district using the vacant school premises? So that's my first suggestion. Ethnic minorities don't have enough activity venues. We have to reach out to these members of ethnic minorities. They know little about the social welfare resources available. I visited this Turkish cultural center for Indians and Pakistanis. They're in a better spot. For other EM members, we have to reach out to them. How do we encourage those EM members to apply to these schemes? Those EM members raise money, they have to pay high rent. In the private market, they don't have enough activity space. Has the government reached out to EM members? Do young people often use these sites? I see these activities as rather old-fashioned. We have to let young people know there are these cheap spaces available. That way, we will have a more active community. In underprivileged communities, their young people, has the government reached out to them? Permanent Secretary. We're asking for an extra $500 million. We believe that will cover roughly 10 more projects. We do have some projects waiting for approval. The member made some good points. As we provide the funding, we should think of ways to get the NGOs to reach out to the community. Better publicity is also needed, as the member suggested. We want a greater array of activities on those vacant sites to meet the needs of the younger generation and also people of all age groups. There is room for us to do more and expand our scope. We should be reaching out to different groups and get different stakeholders involved. We will give thought to those suggestions. Mr. Gary Chan, I was not going to speak, but I noticed some misconceptions among some members. People may think we are wasting extra money. So I want to set the record straight. From my experience, The funding scheme to support the use of vacant government sites by NGOs is a great scheme. First, the government can make use of its vacant sites in school premises. Two, NGOs can run services on vacant sites. And three, people can access those services. So this is not a case where we are recklessly spending our money. This is about helping NGOs deliver services for the public. I myself helped 3 projects apply for the funding. The first project is about the East River Column Hacker Culture Center. Second, a guide dog project. 3, it's a youth uniformed group involving 3,000 young people. In the past, when we were trying to find sites for NGOs, we got indeed vacant school premises, but renovation was needed. An NGO did not have $10 million for the renovation, so we had the vacant school premises, but we could not use the site. And those premises were left idle. Now, with this funding scheme, there's funding for renovation so that we can have a safe place for NGOs to run services. In the end, the public gets to benefit. The third project I mentioned was for a youth uniformed group, 3,000 young people. Now, this funding scheme enables renovation for the school premises. Young people get the training. Isn't that great? Now I turn to the guide dog project. Without these premises, we cannot train guide dogs for those with visual impairment. The government does not have a system in place to train guide dogs, and that does nothing for people with visual impairment. Now, in rural areas, there are places, vacant sites. Without the funding, you cannot have renovation. Now, with the funding, you can renovate the place. Then you can put pictures there telling people about the hacker culture and the East River Column. This proposal merits our support. Some members know little about how this scheme works. Even with vacant sites, you need money for the renovation. Business sponsorships can help, but not much. This funding scheme can truly help NGOs. People worry about monitoring the use of those sites. That's needed. Our system is rigorous. I commend the work of the Development Bureau because the Bureau shows and helps those NGOs every step of the way. There's much hand-holding. This proposal is meaningful and merits our support. The question is, how do we benefit even more NGOs? Now, allow me to digress for a moment. When can we tell that a site is vacant? In Shatin, 2 kindergartens were about to close down. I suggested using those sites for community living rooms, and then the official I called said they had to ask different government departments. I asked how long it would take. The official said it would take roughly 2 years before we can open up those premises. So something is flawed with the procedure. We have to shorten the process, make things move faster. I just want to get all this off my chest. Permanent Secretary, Mr. Gary Chen expressed his support for you instead of asking questions. Ms. Judy Chen. The government is spending public money. Some members don't think the money is well spent. But here, I think for this proposal, the money is well spent. We shouldn't just leave sites idle. These projects allow people from all walks of life to benefit. Now, these sites are used for different purposes, including centers to support members of ethnic minorities. But there is just one project run by members of ethnic minorities. I was working on a case in Tongcheng. 20% of the residents there are EM members. There's a large community of EM members in Tongcheng. In one place, there's a place for Sikh members. There was a notice that said this place would be for members of the Sikh community. But some local residents knew little about the Sikh religion, and they reacted strongly. They said many unpleasant things, and there were more than 100 objections submitted to the Lands Department. On the last page, I see a flow chart. So, in this chart, where can I find the stage where people submit objections? And how much weight is attached to those objections from local residents? I think something went wrong with the communication. Those local residents knew little about the Sikh activities. That place was supposed to open up to local residents. When something like that went wrong and happened, what do we do? PS, please. The member referred to an STT application. In enclosure 3, you see a chart. This is how things go when you apply for funding. Applications for an STT are further upstream, so they're not part of that flowchart. We do encounter the kind of issues from time to time, the kind of issue raised by the members. Some local residents don't like a certain use under an STT application. So our team turns to the local district office for help for mediation. Members of ethnic minorities do need sites for their activities. When objections come up, we get other departments to help out to resolve the objections. Sometimes it takes time, and we have to explain the matters to the local residents. We don't just give up the moment we see an objection. We get other departments to help out. Ms. Judy Chen asked about policy matters. Now, 3 other members are waiting to speak. If no other members wish to speak, we will put the matter to a vote after the 3 members speak.
Mr. Edward Lau. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to express my support on this funding scheme. I agree that we should make good use of vacant government sites. Some members asked about short-term tenancy and temporary use of vacant sites. In the new territories, there are some brownfield sites with short-term tenancies or temporary waivers. The sites have been in use for dozens of years now. So I guess by short-term tenancy, it doesn't mean that the sites are only used for the short run. This funding scheme has offered support to a lot of organizations. The funded projects are meaningful. Like the Permanent Secretary said, 3 animal shelters were set up on these sites. These sites were able to help stray animals. And these sites and animal shelters encouraged people to adopt animals. My question is this. This funding scheme targets vacant government sites. Now, many organizations may be able to identify their own sites. They help encourage people to adopt animals or pets in the new development areas. Would you consider extending this funding scheme to non-government sites, which are used by organizations for non-profit making purposes? I'm talking about offering funding support to help organizations make use of these sites and carry out relevant works. 3 animal shelters are involved, and they can cope with the needs in Kutong North and the neighboring areas. The government is going to resume a lot of land in Hongshui-Q. There might be a higher demand for animal shelters, and NGOs may not be able to cope with such demand. We need government policies. So yes, my major question is whether the funding scheme will be extended to non-government sites. This has to do with government policies. Permanent Secretary. The aim of this funding scheme is to make good use of vacant sites. We target vacant government sites under the scheme. We have limited resources. If we get members' support, we'll get an extra $500 million, and that will cover about 10 projects. At this stage, we do not consider extending the funding scheme to non-government sites. If there are more resources available in the future, we would not rule out the option of extending the scheme to other types of sites. Now, will the government help operate animal shelters in the new development areas? We don't have such a plan at the moment. If we spot any stray animals problems in the new development areas, we will work with the AFCD to deal with the issue. However, at this point, we don't have any plans to develop or operate any animal shelters. Ms. Doreen Kong, I have a couple of questions for the Permanent Secretary. Permanent Secretary said we should make use of vacant sites. Are you ensuring value creation with this funding scheme? We are telling the public that we should not put the vacant sites to waste. You are spending some $60 million for a number of projects. So I want to make sure if this is value for money. I understand that you have a dedicated team that helps monitor the progress of the projects. When the works are completed and as the NGOs are running their projects on the sites, do you have a third party making assessments on the effectiveness of the projects? We see some great ideas from time to time. Let me give you an example. I went to the Jockey Club Arts and Innovation Center. The usage rate is low. There weren't that many people in the center. It's great that we have these funded projects. However, do you conduct yearly reviews on these funded projects to see if the goals and visions have been achieved? Permanent Secretary. The first question is whether we can create any values for the community through the funding scheme. I was inspired by what Mr. Gary Chen said. Mr. Gary Chen mentioned about 3 of the funded projects. One project is in Taku Lane. In the southern part of the New Territories, it is a guiding dog project. Before restoration works were carried out, we saw that the vacant school premises were old and dilapidated. No one was using the site. After restoration works were carried out, the premises was used to train guiding dogs. I see that the project was able to bring together a group of volunteers as well as people with impaired visions. And the premises was used to train guiding dogs. I think this is what we call value creation. The site was not in use. We renovated the site and we gave a meaning to the site. And we were able to bring together a group of people who wanted to train up guide dogs. We shouldn't just look at the number of beneficiaries as we gauge the value of the project. We do not just want to offer support to welfare organizations that receive subsidies or subventions from the government. We want to support small and medium NGOs that do not often get financial assistance from the government. It is often hard for them to secure funding support from private organizations or companies. And this funding scheme allows small and medium organizations to expand their network. Again, this is value creation. And we cannot just gauge the effectiveness through the number of beneficiaries. Permanent Secretary, I believe you have already addressed the first question. Can you respond to member on how you monitor the progress of the project? Well, the member made a suggestion, that is whether we would engage a third party to assess the effectiveness of the project. We would consider this suggestion. After works are completed, we continue to monitor the progress of the project. We have a dedicated team, as mentioned, that visits the site and the NGO concerned yearly to see whether the NGO is still using the site for the original purpose. We also look at whether the number of beneficiaries matches that promised by the NGO. This is what we are doing under the current framework. As to whether we would engage a third party to help make an assessment, we would consider this. Mr. Tony Che. Thank you, Chairman. Over the years, I've been pushing for the government to make good use of vacant sites so that we won't put the sites to waste. The government is now asking for extra funding. And I'm happy to see that because it means that the funding scheme has yielded fruitful results and the government needs extra money so that NGOs can make use of the vacant sites. I understand that some members may have questions about whether the funded projects are cost-effective. The Permanent Secretary has addressed those questions. My question is not about the government's policy. Would you ask the NGOs to chip in? For instance, you put in $10 and the NGOs would put in $1 to give more incentives to the NGOs. Now, I support the two enhancement measures proposed. The first one concerns projects involving sites with a larger area, and the second concerns sites that lack vehicular access. Would you ask the NGOs to develop the vehicular access themselves instead of having the government do it? I wonder if the government can afford to develop the vehicular access. On the enhancement measures, for projects that involve sites with area larger than 2,000 square meters, are you referring to the land area or the floor area? On the second enhancement measure, it's about the upfront cost for using the vacant sites. Are the NGOs going to return the funding to you after getting the upfront budget? Permanent Secretary. For subvented NGOs, should they chip in as well? Well, we will think about this. For small and medium NGOs, it's hard for them to secure funding themselves because they are not as well known. I don't have an amount in mind. I'm just saying that the NGOs should probably fork out money themselves as well. I understand where you come from. I think your suggestion is great. I just want to know whether it would affect the small and medium NGOs. And for the 2,000 square meters is about the land area, not the floor area. The third point about vehicular access. Would the government develop the vehicular access for the NGO first? Well, we're not talking about large-scale works. These works usually cost $12 million. It's better to have one contractor that takes care of all the construction works to contain the size of the construction works. Now, on the point about funding, the funding is dispersed on the reimbursement basis.
Chairman, on the last point, so the NGOs have to pay. They spend that money and then they get reimbursed. That's why I brought up my first point about this ratio as kind of matching ratio. Now, apart from the site area, we should also consider the floor area. When you have a large floor area, we should look at ways to make the most of the floor area too. Members, we have just one member who will speak for the second round, and then we put the matter to a vote. We have roughly 40 minutes left after the voting. We now spend 1 or 2 hours each item. So after we vote on this matter, we end the meeting today. Dr. Wendy Hong speaking for the second round, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak for the second round. I gave 5 reasons for opposing this proposal. Now, one more reason. 14 out of the 29 projects approved involve temporary structures. Do these structures follow temporary or permanent structures? If they are following temporary structures, these are inferior structures. But then the PS said these STTs can be renewed time and again. But then if we have temporary structures with temporary standards, wouldn't there be safety risks? If those structures are meant for long-term use, why not build with permanent standards? So that's another reason to oppose this project. Now, I want to echo Mr. Tony Tse's point. It's hard to secure cost effectiveness with the current approach. Instead, we should be giving subsidies on a matching basis for NGOs, say $1 from the NGO for every dollar from the government. Small and medium NGOs should be getting their funding through social welfare funding schemes, not through this funding scheme. PS, please. The member said half of the project involve temporary structures. There's a misconception here. The structures in these projects follow the standards for permanent structures. In individual cases where modules are suitable, we use those. But for other projects, the structures follow the standards for permanent structures. Those structures are built for long-term use. We call these short-term tenancies. Once the tenancy expires, the tenancies are renewed every quarter. As long as no other government department wants the land back, we let the NGO keep using those sites. In many cases, the NGOs keep the site for more than 10 years. And about the point about matching subsidies, we will give thought to that. But as I just said, we consider many factors. We have to think about the impact on NGOs of a certain scale when they want to apply for the funding scheme. If there are no other questions, I now put FCR bracket 2024 to 25, number 21 to a vote. Will members in favor of the proposal please raise their hands? Thank you. Those against, please raise their hands. Dr. Wendy Hong is the only one against this proposal. I think the majority of members voted in favor of this proposal. I declare the proposal endorsed. Our next meeting will be on July 19th at 2:30 p.m. So we have just one item left. We should have enough time at the next meeting to deal with that item. Thank you for joining the meeting today. Meeting adjourned.